Deputy Connolly.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Minister, I have to say I recognise your full commitment to this. I've engaged with you on issues regarding this issue. I've heard you talk at our parliamentary party meetings, and I think you've showed great commitment and enthusiasm in this role. And, you know, there has to be some recognition that in the space and time that you've been allowed, you've introduced, that 400 special classes will be introduced from September. I'm not sure if that's a record, but certainly it's significant. Now, I understand fully and I agree, and the Taoiseach says this frequently, that's no consolation to anybody or any family who has no place for their child come September, but I know that you will continue to work in that area and that hopefully we will continue to roll out further places in special schools and further special classes for those children who need them. I just want to confine my comments somewhat to one service that's mentioned in the motion, the counter motion, and that's the NEPS service. And I recognise, Minister, that there will be a further, I suppose, evolution of the NEPS service with the counselling in primary schools pilot scheme over the next 2 years. That's to be welcomed. But I suppose traditionally, NEPS would have been solely responsible maybe for the assessment of a pupil. Maybe I'm going back some time, but in my own teaching career, that's what we would have associated NEPS with, you know, in the past. Now, that has changed a lot. And unfortunately, NEPS no longer have the wherewithal, I suppose, in terms of personnel to make sure that they are carrying out all assessments that are needed of children in primary schools. Now, schools, I think, would have a preference that NEPS would be the assessment authority or the assessment person, and I think parents and families would have the same preference. They get great consolation from knowing that an assessment has been undertaken by a state service as opposed maybe to a private psychologist. You know, I recognise that given the volume of assessments that are taking place and the volume of children and the needs of children, it's not possible for that to be the case. But I do think one thing we need to look at, Minister, is the cost of the psychological assessment on the families of the child in the private sector. There is a shortage of such psychologists, and I think we would all be familiar with hearing that there are, you know, a various scale in terms of cost, but certainly it's not cheap, and it's costing families a lot of money to have that psychological assessment taking place. NEPS services do seem to be stretched. And again, I'm saying this in recognition and knowledge, Minister, that NEPS have been embellished with further psychologists in the past year or two, but given the increased demand for assessment we are seeing and the increased need, it does seem that NEPS do need to be further resourced and the number of psychologists within the NEPS service increased. Just to give you an example, Minister, in my own community, NEPS psychologist was on maternity leave and unfortunately couldn't have been replaced during that time.